Hi, folks. Welcome to this week. We're going to be talking about innovation and the city with this week's Chu Chat. Per usual, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. This session will be recorded, but your surname won't be called out. So we'll just be going by first names, and put in your questions at the bottom at the Q&A box, and we will ask them as we go along. Any questions that we don't answer, please email us at lordmayor@dublincity.ie. I know some people have said if their questions don't get answered, where do they go? lordmayor@dublincity.ie, and we'll make sure to get it answered somehow by the relevant person. So today we have Shane Waring and Jamie Cudden, both very much in charge of the innovation of our city. So I'm going to let them go through what they've been doing, what they do in their departments that they manage, and some of the insights in the city. We'll be then asking questions through this session. So I'm going to kick off with Jamie first. Jamie, a bit about you and what you do.
Great, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. Great to be here today. So I'm Jamie Cudden, and I lead the Smart City program in Dublin City Council. And a lot of people say, what the hell is that all about? So hopefully I'll give you a bit of a summary. I look at, I suppose, new emerging technologies. And if you just think about the last 5-10 years, how fast technology is moving, everything we do on our phone, even to think that like companies like Google, Facebook, all those, they're only new companies really. And then we see other technologies like e-scooters, electric bikes, all these different things appear on our streets. And you kind of think, wow, it's moving so fast. So from a city perspective, you kind of think about, well, how can we take advantage of a lot of these trends, but not so much from a technology sake, but how can we use technology to solve some of the big problems and challenges in our city? So over the last 5-6 years, I've been very fortunate to kind of lead a program. I've been asked to kind of 5 or 6 years to put a bit of shape and structure in terms of how we roll out these technologies or take advantage of them. And when I look at where we started 5 or 6 years ago, and I think about where we are now, maybe I'll talk a little bit about that journey and some of the kind of interesting or cool things that we've been able to do. But really, the city, we face such big challenges, and everything from climate challenges to environmental challenges to mobility challenges. And then we live in a city where we've got some of the biggest innovative companies in the world on our doorstep. Some of the big technology companies, but wonderful startups, innovators, people with great ideas. And then we've got some amazing research centers as well. So for me, it's like, how do we connect all that? We know how to run a city, or we know what the problems are in terms of our city when we're working within Dublin City Council and with our partners. How can we take some of those problems and challenges and then work with people who have great ideas and can actually help us solve some of them? So 5 or 6 years ago, we kind of said, well, we're not going to solve all the problems in the city in one go. So why don't we start looking at maybe some areas in the city where we can make the technology more real, and we can apply these innovations. Everything from, how do we better manage waste? And you probably see the big belly bins out in the city where they compacts the waste, and it's kind of helps more kind of, I suppose, better collection regimes, to, looking at drones, things like drones, and looking at, how do we use drones in a way that can benefit or help emergency response, working with the fire brigade, or, just how do we get better data on different things that we do in the city that, moves away from a political debate to a debate where we're actually using information to make better decisions. So there's so much to it, but I just think it's all about collaboration, and it's about how do we take these problems in the city and work with others and create an environment for us to innovate. And we kind of set up a couple of these districts where we're in Docklands to start with. Could we kind of accelerate some of these projects where you might need access to street infrastructure, or put sensors out to collect better data on the air quality or something, and create these structures with partnerships with the research centers, et cetera, to kind of do that, and then show people what the future might look like of our city, and make it a little bit more real, as opposed to say, well, they're doing it in all other cities in the world, why don't we do it here? It's about making things real, but it's about doing it in collaboration and actually focusing on communities and citizens, and making sure that what we're first and foremost concentrating on is better outcomes for them. So Yeah, that's a little bit of a flavour. I could talk
We're
about.
going to delve into some of the projects in a bit. So, but it sounds like this is the thing. When I first heard about yourselves in Smart Cities and Shane's beta, I was there thinking, oh my God, there's like loads of things being done here. And it's actually what people are asking for. So I'm going to go into some of the things your section is doing in a second. I'm going to move to Shane and chat about a bit about yourself, Shane, and what you're doing and, well, what you do basically.
Hazel, thanks a million for inviting me along today. So I'm Shane Waring. I have been in Dublin City Council since 2001. I would call myself an urban impact entrepreneur. So, for example, you would have a business entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur. Often there's a third type, often referred to, and the idea is that they're driven by trying to make change in cities. So I used to work in our city architects, and I took a career break and a secondment from the city council, and during that time I set up GoCar, and I also worked on a project called Designing Dublin. And from all those different experiences, I established Dublin City Council Beta. The idea is that it gives us a second brand as an organisation to be able to clearly identify, clearly signal when we're experimenting, when we're trying to learn, and it gives us an alternative way to maybe our corporately adopted policy or execution kind of processes, that type of thing.
Is beta in the name then? Is it like the things that Dublin City Council will want to roll out in trial?
Say that again.
Is beta kind of in the name itself, that these are projects that Dublin City Council wants to roll out and trial in the first stage, and mightn't be things that are permanent?
Yeah, so the phrase beta comes from the IT industry. So, for example, Google released Gmail had it in beta for 5 years, and the phrase means that something is being released early into the world and it's imperfect, and it actually wants to learn from real world experience in order to better improve it. So I would say a beta project, we don't know actually if we want to do it. It's something that we want to learn about as a city, as an organization, and also as an organization. And I actually prefer to say that we don't actually yet know if we want to do it. That's the point of the trial.
And how many projects come through beta, and how many gets actually enacted? Like, as in, I guess what I would like to tease out in this conversation is a lot of people will have heard about beta and smart cities, but kind of go, oh, what do they actually do? And how does it actually come to light, some of the things they do? And what have they done in the last year, say, especially in light of COVID? So Shane, how many projects go through beta, and how many are we seeing around the city at the moment?
So I think about roughly 28 projects have been explored to date. I think they've cost, I think it's around 48,000 in total. They've been over several years, and the one maybe that people might know most is, for example, the Dublin Canvas project that has actually expanded across all of Dublin City Council, but actually to other 3 local authorities as well. And that's the artworks on traffic light boxes, near a traffic light. Another one might be, let's say, the bike bunkers project. If you live in a small house, and you want to cycle, where do you put your bike? So that project is scaling up at the moment. Trying to think of any other projects that people might know.
I think those two them itself, I think people wouldn't have known they were necessary beta projects, but now that you say it, I think everyone has seen the boxes around the city that has artwork on it, and there has been some roads and streets that have said, oh, we've just seen this bunker, how do we get one? So good work is what I'm saying.
Thanks.
Jamie, tell me this. You talked about smart cities, and I guess Shane explained, well, how does beta work, and how it comes to the fruition of a project. When you look at the projects you're looking at, what is the most important thing? Because I know you yourselves are looking in terms of smart cities, of flooding, and how we're addressing it in the city.
Yeah, I mean, just over the last week, we've probably got 50 plus projects under the program at the moment. It's really scaled up over the last couple of years. But really, one of the big concepts in terms of smart cities and the technology is actually using sensors that are really low cost to collect data or give you access to data that can help you respond quicker And environment is obviously a big opportunity in terms of how we address environmental issues. And we know with flooding, just look at the rain, during the week, some torrential showers, rain that I don't think I experienced when I was a kid, that we get this kind of monster rain. But, when that kind of hits, it's very localized. But also, if we have better, I suppose, access to data in terms of where the rain is hitting heaviest, and if it's in higher risk areas, we can respond quicker, and we can, allocate resources in a more efficient way. So there's a whole network. A lot of people don't know. There's over hundreds of sensors across Dublin, in rivers, or measuring rainfall in real time. That's bringing all that data back real time to a dashboard, and then we can respond faster. But what's really exciting is maybe 10, 15 years ago, the cost of these sensors were so prohibitive. Whereas now, they're 10 times cheaper, and you can put them on a battery and connect them to these new type of networks in ways you could never imagine. And it's kind of, that type of concept, not just for rain, but also for maybe the quality of the air, or all sorts of things that we can measure in the city. But one of the really exciting projects I loved working on was with our gully monitoring team. There's a guy called Roy O'Donnell there, but we actually had this idea where normally what we do is we say this is what the solution should be, and internally people say, well, this is where the technology is. But what we decided to do at the very start of the Smart City program was, let's put challenges out to the market. Let's not predict where the technology or the innovation is. Let's just say we have a challenge with flooding. Our gullies, when they overflow, they can create problems in high risk flooding areas. How can we respond to that with new innovative technology? And Roy and his team and our team, we ended up working with these local companies, and they actually created these devices designed in Dublin that would fit into the drain, really low cost, less than €100 idea, and it would give you back information in real time when the drain was overflowing. And we've 40 of those now across the city. And really, the two companies that we're working with, one called Denalto and another called Semicon, now are selling and innovating and selling these services internationally on the back of working in Dublin. So we kind of have this idea: if you can innovate, come up with new technology solutions, test them in Dublin with us, solve our problems, you can sell this to any city in the world. But it's designed and developed in Dublin, creates jobs, solves problems. So that's the whole mantra of what our program is about.
Work, Jamie? I guess my question is, on the 40 odd models that you had in different parts of the city,
Yeah.
How did you find it? As in, what was the data given that actually then went to correct any issues we had upstream?
Yeah, so basically, we're at the very downstream bit in terms of when the problem hits, who can respond and unblock the gully. So that it pings to a mobile. But we have other programs that are really looking at more sustainable urban drainage systems, because we really need to address further where the problem's actually coming from. So programs like green roofs and maybe more sustainable materials that can soak the water or the rainfall. That's where we need to get to, and we have really interesting nature-based solutions, all that. So it's interesting. It's not just about the technology. The technology is really just kind of, it measures the impact, but then it raises questions in terms of, well, how do we kind of take a more holistic view of this, and how do we then invest in more sustainable solutions, but then hopefully collect data that demonstrates that there's a real impact here, that we need to be doing more of this. So it's a whole kind of, I suppose, ecosystem there, but just it's a great example of innovation, the city working with startups and actually creating new opportunities.
I find this fascinating. Well, firstly, two things about me. People might have noticed with the upstream comment that I love my puns. So I like them to be fantastic. But the second thing is, I used to work for NDRC, which is basically we dealt with startups, and it was amazing to see some of the Irish startups coming through and helping them through to try to get funding and go through the different stages. So it's like some of the work that's being said here is something that we've seen in that space, and it's great to see that we are, like, a lot of people look at Ireland and they look at agriculture, but the tech space and the innovation space we have here is incredible. So Jamie, thank you. Shane, I have a question here for you, and this is something that I know a lot of people were asking. Like, you mentioned two projects there that people have seen, but they didn't necessarily know that it was beta. How do people get involved in the beta? How do they submit? Because it sounds like you're doing a lot of great work, and it also sounds like, if I'm not wrong, the fact that you founded GoCar, you have you may want to see a sustainable city, and how are you working towards that?
Yeah, so anyone can make a suggestion for a project. For example, if they go to dccbeta.ie, there's a suggest link there, and they can add their suggestion. So that suggest form forces them to fill in two separate areas, and one of those is what's the problem that they're actually trying to solve, and then what is the solution that they're proposing. And because often actually by getting somebody to actually tell you what's the problem that they're trying to solve, there might be other ways to solve that. Or if you actually add up, how many people are actually saying, naming that same issue or that same opportunity, often that can teach you something else as well. So that's the process I use myself as well. So anytime I have a suggestion, I add it in through there myself also. In terms of way we need to work, so children born in the last few years, the World Health Organization says chances are they will live to be 100. So how can we think about the Dublin of 100 years' time that they will live in? Equally, so I have a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. So let's say that 3.5-year-old, his childhood is over in about 7 years. So how can we change much faster as a city? So how can we think big, like in 100 years' time, and how can we start small? How can we what can we do in 2 weeks' time? And how can we change much, much faster as a city? So that was one of the reasons for trying to create the second brand. It was to really clearly signal when we're trying to learn, in order to give us a better way to actually speed up being able to discuss things and roll out new projects. So all projects get a sign on them seeking feedback. They all go on a website. They are all pushed out via social media. They all get discussed on social media. And at the end of a trial, there will be a report, and that will either decide, is there more that we need to learn, or actually have we learned everything we need to know now? Actually, now we need to figure out how to scale it, how to actually deliver this at scale. And so, for example, let's say
what's the time frame between that, Shane, between something that's at inception stage and saying it's something that needs to be installed to then scaling? What are we talking about there?
It depends on what the thing is. So you trial something. So if you want to trial something, you have assumptions. You assume something is good or you have something is bad. What are you going to measure to know if that is correct? And then you trial something in order to generate those measurements. So, for example, let's say you wanted to try out a new type of street bin. Maybe you could learn on a daily basis. Each day you could empty the bin and look what percentage of it were the right type of recyclables, for example. But maybe, for example, if your project involved plants, you need to leave it there for a few years because they have to grow, and you actually have to just watch, did people pull the weeds out or that type of thing. So in a way, there's no one perfect answer, but the aim would be to get from a suggestion to a trial as fast as possible, and then the trial takes as long as it needs, and then to get from the end of a trial to a decision as fast as possible. So they're the bits that you can actually really, really speed up.
Okay. Ro here wants to know, are your teams expanding in DCC? Where else would there be new job opportunities for innovation in urban design and smart cities, beta, the whole lot? So Shane, you first, and then I move it to Jamie.
So the way I describe beta is that it's a terrible phrase, but I call it like a cloud section. So the idea is that, so I'm the one full-time member, staff member, and then the idea is that as projects require staff from different sections to work on it, we pull in those staff. So, for example, if Jamie earlier was talking about SUDS, so let's say you needed somebody from parks involved with the tree, and you need somebody from let's say transportation in terms of the road, and you need somebody from drainage. How do you pull all those people together? So the idea is that you pull them together around a beta project. In terms of opportunities, I mean, always get in touch, and I'm always interested to meet new people.
Well, there you go, folks. You know where he is. So, and he's on Twitter as well. You can find him. Jamie, your team, how is it looking, and will there be expansion?
Yeah, I mean, it's grown so much over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, it started off with just myself and maybe a couple of us, and we set up the Smart Dublin Regional Initiative, and that's really grown because it's kind of collaboration around the 4 local authorities. But we've got quite a unique model where we've got kind of a team within DCC. There's probably about 12 of us kind of driving these type of projects. But then we we partner with research centres, universities, and others. So we kind of leverage the Science Foundation Ireland partnership model, and we work with like Trinity College on their Connect Research Centre, which is future networks and connectivity. We work with Insight, which is the data analytics centre, and then we kind of co-fund and hire roles through these centres. And we've set up these innovation districts like Smart Docklands. We partner with DCU, where we have a kind of a campus, innovation campus for smart city technology. And then we have Dublin 8, which is really exciting, looking at partnered with St. James's and the hospitals, and it's looking at a health and wellness district, and that's an amazing opportunity in itself. And then we kind of co-fund, and then we leverage other funds. So we're very creative, and anyone involved in innovation will have to be very creative in terms of how you build these partnerships. So there's loads of opportunities and new opportunities coming down the line. So I'd say to Ro, check out Smart Dublin website, sure, pop a message to me on LinkedIn, and we'll keep in touch and see what's coming down the line. So yeah, good question, and you never know what could happen here.
This is the thing, I think, like, be it that a lot of people are more in their areas, in the surrounding villages in Dublin, or kind of, and they're looking at things going, oh, how do I get involved? How do I make things better? By the way, Jamie, there is a comment saying the gully problem is their size, and more importantly, the limits of our Victorian combined system drainage needs serious infrastructure for work to upgrade, which is a point, because that is something that I think our Victorian pipe system through Irish Water is something that needs to be looked at. But that was a comment more than a question. I like to look at COVID and how we are doing as a city, and what needs to be done, because we have the recovery task force that is looking at the more practical side of day to day. How do we have more bins? What are we going to do with loos? Where are people sitting? Shane, what do you see in terms of beta? Like, what are the challenges of that beta has seen in the last 14 months, apart from the obvious challenges that we face? And what do you see yourselves needing to roll out in the next while? And where do you hope, or where do you think the city will get to? It's a very broad question, I know, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. So I think one of the issues in terms of COVID is that it means everyone's in emergency mindset. And so from a trial perspective, usually that's difficult. Normally you want things nice and calm to be able to nicely discuss things and so on. So it makes it different from that perspective. I think in terms of maybe what we need to prioritize, I think it makes sense that we would think beyond COVID. So we would say, what are the things that we think Dublin should have anyway? What way do we think Dublin should be anyway? And if those things also help support people and businesses during COVID, well, then they should be prioritized, those things. So, for example, for a long time, we've said we would like to have a more walkable city, more cyclable city, and so on. If addressing those also supports people's issues with COVID, well, then, for example, that's why we should be prioritizing those types of things, or seating, or lots of things.
So if I was to say to you, well, listen, Beta Project can roll out anything in the next 6 months, what would you like to see? Someone has said here, have you tried beta testing public toilets? So, but what one, I'm presuming that's a cheeky one from the person, but yeah, he has a point. Like, what do you want to see beta testing? If the world was your oyster, if only came down now and said, here, Shane, Jamie, here's a massive check for you to do whatever you want, well, what would you do?
I think what I would like to see is like neighborhood beta. So how can neighborhoods decide what they want to be as a neighborhood? How can they just change locally themselves? So instead of us as a city council pushing out solutions, for example, let's say we pushed out Dublin Canvas to different boxes, or we pushed out bike bunkers. So that bike bunkers locations are chosen by as people apply, we see a little cluster. But imagine a neighborhood can instead say, actually, we want bike bunkers all over the place, or we want Dublin Canvas, or we want different solutions. How can we work that way around instead? That's, I think, my magic wand project.
Well, I think it's a good one, because you see in Denmark that apart from this 15-minute city that people talk about, there's this 1-minute city where everyone is within this block, and you have different age groups living within a block. You have community services, you have everything that's there. And I think we do have this community mentality since COVID. So I hate to say leverage it, but there might be time that we say, hey, what do you guys want to do? Jamie, same question to you. Like from COVID, what have been the challenges for Smart City, and how do you see yourselves in the next while? And I guess the magic check from Owen, like what would you do with it if there was such a thing?
Yeah, if there was, like, absolutely, you never get one of those from Owen.
You may be watching this, just to warn you.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't say that. But no, I have to say, COVID, I mean, obviously one of the most challenging experiences we've probably ever experienced in our lives. It's an unbelievable opportunity to rethink everything. And I think, from a technology perspective, you've just probably seen, we've seen a decade of acceleration in terms of technology and innovation, just how we use it. So everything that we've been doing on the Smart City program has actually become much more real over the last year, and that's created huge opportunity. I never like to use opportunity, I put an opportunity out of challenge, but things like connectivity. I think when we all went working from home, whether we had good mobile signal or broadband, I think we knew it was important before COVID, but my God, we know it's important now, and it's absolutely critical. And I think one of the big projects I'm leading on is setting up a kind of telecoms unit in Dublin City Council, and just looking at how we can reduce the barriers and blockages to roll out and support connectivity and telecoms, and to future-proof. We're probably going to see unprecedented amounts of capital investment in public realm projects, cycleways, bus connects. We need to make sure that we're putting in the ducting, we're putting the wireless connectivity on top of that, and it's all baked into the plans. And unfortunately, at the moment, we haven't been thinking about that enough, but we are now. You know what I mean? So I think that's an absolutely critical one. The other thing that really struck me in terms of COVID, and one of the things I've done, I stopped using my Leap card, and I cycle everywhere now. So it's a brilliant experience. I've just experienced the city in a whole new way on my bike. But I kind of think all this COVID mobility investment, I'm so excited about how the city is transforming, pushing kind of walking and cycling. But I think we need to get our head around in terms of the data and the digital that sits behind that, because at some point we're going to have to really make the case for why this investment is working and what the figures look like. And I know Shane and myself always talk about this. Sometimes it's the bit that gets forgotten. You do all the capital investment, but if you don't put that layer on top that shows how many cyclists are using it, what's the shift in kind of getting people out of cars. And other bits that excite me is just seeing the likes of Bleeper bikes, Moby bikes. I know the guys who set that up, but I just love seeing this new future of kind of shared mobility and just people cycling on bikes. Maybe they don't have to own, but just people out and about. And I just think that's the future, in terms of how we use transport and hopefully get out of the cars. And I think when we come back into recovery, we just need to think about, like, what's the right type of recovery. Let's not go back into the kind of the old ways of congestion, and we need to rethink the city centre as well. But a lot of that is underpinned by data, and we've set up a couple of interesting initiatives on the back of COVID. Smart tourism program in partnership with Fáilte Ireland. What's the future of tourism look like for our cities? How do we kind of understand better how the tourism product evolves? What's the role of technology in that? So yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of projects. It's almost like the Smart City program scaled up by 10 on the back of COVID, and we were well prepared because we had a lot of the infrastructure and relationships in place before then.
Okay, that sounds, well, this is the thing, you touched on it there, that the data and sustainable city. Like, one of the questions from Greg here is about climate emergency. Like, we're in a climate emergency. I think if, like, everyone's worrying about COVID, but both aren't mutually exclusive. It is linked. So as we move out of COVID, hopefully, touch wood, but we are still facing a climate emergency. What, like, you talked about data there and various projects in terms of flooding, in terms of, I know there are other ones coming down the line when looking at climate action, but like, Shane, to you on the city side, because again, back to the go-kart point, like the sustainable transport, the sharing, like how do you see, and this is not just beta, but how do you see the city in terms of what we need like when it comes to getting people out of their cars and into their bikes. I know a lot of people accuse me of saying, well, she's green and therefore all she cares about is her bike. I love my car. I like to tell everyone I love my car, but I also know that there is only a finite amount of time we can still do the same thing as we did before. So Shane, like what suggestions do you have, and what have you been thinking just from your own experience with the kind of shared transport? What do we need to do?
There's a great meme going around, and it's showing this little wave, and it's COVID, and then it's this huge tsunami coming out the back of it, which is climate change. And I don't think either globally as an entire population of whatever we are, 7 billion or something now, or in Ireland, no one has gotten their heads around it yet, how big the scale of the challenge that's coming down the line at us. So one of the things I think we should be doing is figuring out how to get better at scanning the horizon. People are very good at maybe thinking in maybe 5 years time, that kind of time scale. Like, how can we think about 100 years time or 200 years time? How can we think about 2 weeks time? How can we think on those two different time scales? And I think generally society and actually all organizations, including Dublin City Council, struggle at that. And I often think of the some of the great houses in Ireland, this idea that they planted the trees and those trees weren't mature for 3 or 4 generations. How can we start to think on those sort of timescales? In terms of Dublin specifically, I would like to see, I was always struck by, when I was on that Design in Dublin project, we were running street interviews with people, and I remember one of the things that came out was a lot of people said they went to out of town shopping centres because it was just easy, and it was easy in terms of they could let go of their child's hand. They had no stress involved with it, and they went there and it was just practicality. Whereas they said what they loved about Dublin City was they loved the ambience, they loved the feel of it, they loved it, how random it was, they loved all that, but it was just a slightly stressful environment. So I think as a parent, what I would like to see is, how can I think of Dublin city centre as a nice, really, really relaxing place to be, and green, that type of thing. So like, a place that we would actually really, really look forward to just strolling around. And every once in a while you get another coffee. But how can we get to that sort of city that really draws people in, like the heart of Dublin?
Well, my thoughts are pedestrianise the whole thing, but I'm not quite sure Owen or Brendan will agree with me on that one. I've been harping on about pedestrianising South William Street for quite a while now. But that's to your point, Shane. Like, when parents and families talk about shopping centres, they can let their kids roam free. The time that I remember letting Alex roam free around the streets here was when we trialled pedestrianised the different blocks of the city. So I think, to your point about how do we plan for not just the 5 years, but the next 100 years, is really important. So, like, Jamie, like when Shane talks about the tsunami, it is coming. Like, whether we like it or not, the climate emergency is here. So, like, in terms of smart cities, what do you see? Like, what do you see yourselves in scaling up on that will be helping to counter?
Yeah, 80% of our projects are linked to some sort of climate action or climate initiative. So that definitely, we see that happening big time. But in terms of the project, some of the really exciting projects that we're working on, one is looking at smart mobility hubs, and it's the concept of how you integrate, maybe electric cars, electric bikes together in type of an app-based interface. So, if you think about it, at the moment, you've got GoCar, you've got Yuko, you've got Bleeper bikes, Dublin bikes, Moby. You have to have an app for each one of those. And it's kind of messy, if you want to go from A to B, and then you've got your Leap card. Wouldn't it be amazing, if that was all seamless and you could just switch between them however you wanted and not worry about how much it costs, because it was just something that was worked out in the background. That's known as mobility as a service. That's one of the hottest trends, globally, in terms of how can we think about this future. You might even have scooters, in another year, but it all needs to link, in terms of, you need to give people options, maybe to drop their car a couple of kilometers outside the city, maybe hop on a scooter or a bike, pedestrianise more of the city centre, and maybe give out a bit of space for these shared mobility services. But not only that, another big project we have, it's a flagship European project, is looking at the future of logistics in cities. and we're working with on Post. We also have innovation projects with UPS and DPD and others. But the whole area of logistics, look at how, the whole e-commerce thing has exploded over the last year. But we really need to think about the right type of logistics, and they're clean vehicles. Can they use cargo bikes? Cargo bikes are one of the most exciting things happening in the logistics space in city centres now. And how do we cater for that and create policies to reduce emissions, better air quality, and reduce congestion, but in a clean and green way? It's all very possible. The technology just helps knit that together, but it's the policies, and I suppose people like yourself pushing those policies to make sure that we can create the right type of future and direction for our cities.
I think what we need to create is, so if you think of it this way, so let's say as a city council, we have our development plan that comes out, every few years, and that's only ever thinking pretty much, it's only ever thinking generally within maybe the next decade specifically. Now, sure, some of that might be thinking a bit beyond that, but we don't generally as a society or as a city have a place where we can actually discuss beyond that, because when something is that close, it gets very specific. It's very hard. It's very easy to kind of knock something. It's very easy to say, well, that won't work. We can't get to that in the next few years. So how can we, if we can think a bit beyond that, it frees us up to actually brainstorm and actually, be much freer in what we're kind of imagining for the future, for our future. And then I think equally at the other extreme, how can we imagine what can we do in 2 weeks' time to get towards that, to start to take the first step towards that, and that can just be, how can we start really, really small somewhere to get us towards that vision?
Well, it's funny you say that, Shane, because Greg is asking, is there systemic challenges for beta trials because people need time to get used to new things? Is there, don't always get around to trying them out before the trial period ends? So is this becoming a challenge for us to even look at new things and innovate, because people don't want to sit down and plan for the future, rather they just want to fix what's immediate?
Yeah, people always think of, so that ideas come into people's heads based on their experience. So, they walk outside their front door and they've nowhere for their kid to play. And so they suddenly say, well, actually, how can we solve this? And so the way my role is to take that. So their suggestion will come from a very personal place. And my role is then to take that and say, well, actually, if we take that, actually, that is a citywide problem. How can we solve that at a citywide level? So the trial will be specific somewhere. It'll be trialing some, whatever the trial is, it'll be on specific streets somewhere, and specific people are using that. Now, a call out will go out on social media to try and ask people to swing by and have a look and so on. But you don't need everyone to use something to learn from it. What you need to learn is just what's good enough. Have you learned enough in order to make a decision? And that doesn't necessarily need a huge amount of people. What I often say is, if 100 people are telling you that's a terrible idea, you don't necessarily need 100,000 people telling you it's a terrible idea or a great idea. Often that can be good. It can be good enough in that scale.
Yeah, I think it's become clear to people that we talk about climate emergency here and the different ways of using data and different projects, but there's a practical side, not practical side, but Shane, am I right to say beta is across all of DCC? So it's not just one area or another, because there's Evelyn here is asking in terms of neighborhood disability nursing homes, that is there a function for beta to make sure that there's trials of long-term units that has temporary kind of kitted equipment for people with disability, is something that beta could look at in future as well? Or are we talking about kind of the full spectrum of different things?
So I say it's like a diagonal slice through the organization. In theory, it's just anytime as an organization we want to learn about something, that can be a beta project. So it's a design-led, evidence-based process to give us a systematic way to have a conversation as a city and have a conversation as an organization about something. Now, at the moment, it very much focuses on livability aspects. So I would like each neighborhood to be able to say they want something, and in the background we have figured out, they want a specific solution, for example, like bike bunkers, and we have in the background figured out how to give that to them. And so then neighborhoods are just basically able to draw in solutions as they want them. So in theory, it can be anything. Anytime there's something that we are uncertain about, anytime we have doubts or that we have assumptions, that is something that I would say should be trialed. Whether that's trialed as a beta project or something else, I would say should be trialed. And a trial is clear, systematic process. In advance, you say, measure some things, you make your change, and then you measure again, and either things got better or worse, and so on. So that's essentially what a trial is. So otherwise what you're doing is you're sitting at a desk trying to make something perfect. Whereas ideally you would, good today is better than perfect next week. Ideally you would trial something good today and you would start learning.
So back to that point of what Shane offered earlier on is if you have an idea, come to him with it, and he will. I'm not trying to send everyone to you, but like this goes back to how we change things for this year when it comes to even development plan. We kind of want to be city led and we want to be community led, and we want people to feed in their ideas and opinions. I think I was talking to John O'Hara and he said the city development plan submissions have increased by 150%. So it's now 750 something submissions compared to the previous iteration of the plan. And this is where our city is at now. It seems like people are craving to provide people with ideas, and also then it's great to see yourselves there as a team to be able to take on the ideas and trial it, as you say. Jamie, I like you touched on something there that made me think about the connectivity. The one thing I remember very well one time when I went back to Hong Kong was my granny was able to use her watch to tap onto the bus. And then she went to 7-Eleven and bought something again with the same thing. So it was an octopus card that was built into her watch for older people. And this octopus card, which is supposed to be like our Leap card, worked everywhere. It worked everywhere on taxis, on shops, on supermarkets. Like, can we get to that stage at some stage in this city?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know linking in with the NTA, there's a roadmap and there's a process there to get there. It just takes a bit of time. But I'd imagine the next 3 years we'll start seeing that stuff rolled out in Dublin, 3 or 4 years. So it's all going to happen. It's probably just a matter of time. But sometimes it's good to have other cities trailblazing. So then if it doesn't work for them, we can be the second or third and learn from their mistakes. And other times. Really, other times it's great to be trailblazing as well. So I think you're absolutely right. But in terms of the engagement piece on the development plan, I think definitely there's a huge appetite for people to engage more. One of the projects that we're really looking at is the future of planning and this idea of creating 3D models for the city and for new plans. And we started about 2 years ago where you could put on headsets and have virtual reality environments. So think about gaming environments, but putting Dublin into the game, and then putting a high-rise building, and then understanding how that might impact you. But we worked with the bridges team in Dublin City Council, and when they're designing some of the new bridges over the Liffey, they could put the headsets on and say, well, actually, maybe we need to tweak this because on the piece of paper or on the screen, it didn't look like that. But when I'm walking around in the virtual environment, it looks completely different. But we have this big vision, and we're working with a company called Bentley and Microsoft to look at, well, what's the future planning look like? And we need to move towards these I suppose 3D models where on your phone you can engage and see the different angles and look at the context. We need to move away from a little A4 piece of paper that says this is what the plan is, and then you look at a drawing in a PDF that makes no sense. So the technology is all evolved. So we're really excited about the potential of 3D planning and community engagement and understanding and working to kind of explore how to engage with people in new ways using this type of technology. I think is great.
And Jamie, well, we're wrapping up now, but there's a last few questions. One of them has a good point about, it sounds like with yourselves, you have lots going on and you have yourselves and your teams trying to get it all done. But is it the case that up the line, and I'm not talking about just within council, I'm talking about nationally, is it the case that in so many areas we just have too many agencies? Like we have 56 agencies apparently in transport, so I've been told. So do these just form massive bottlenecks? Should we completely strip it back to almost startup mode and go, well, listen, it should be like 1 or 2 person and that's it kind of way?
Yeah, I mean, I probably should say no comment, but
this is a friendly space, so I think, well,
you've been watching too much Line of Duty.
Yeah, but I think it's a really good point, and even within the city council itself, the setting up this telecoms unit, there's a huge amount of different agencies externally, government bodies, cuts across, but even internally within the council, it cuts across so many different departments. And one of the challenges is that you have a lot of silos, if you want to call it that way, but people will have different particular views in terms of how things should be done, or what they're willing to explore. with you. And I think that's sometimes bringing people along that journey is the hardest thing. But one thing we've really learned is the best way to do it, and Jane as well on beta projects, just do it. Do small things, get stuff deployed out on the streets, create districts where you can move faster, because there's no point saying, oh, they're doing it in Hong Kong, isn't it great, or they're doing it in the US. We need to do it here, and we need to make it real, because it doesn't feel real if you're just talking about other cities. And I think one thing we've learned from our work in Smart Docklands and DCU and D8 is when you actually can walk people the streets and show them the benefits of new technologies or the bike bunker scheme or whatever, that's a game changer, because then they're like, well, I want more of that. It's real. I can see a path to how we deploy that. But it's about bringing people along that journey, and the culture. To be honest, I lead the Smart City program, all about tech, but it's not about the tech at all. It's about culture, and it's about changing mindsets, and it's about upskilling, and I suppose explaining to people what the potential and opportunity is, and really teaching them that there's new ways of doing things. The world has moved on, and we need to future-proof our city.
One of my favorite expressions is it's essentially resilience is like a superpower for the public sector staff. So we learn how to be really good at just getting our head down and just working around all these agencies and just making things happen. It does require a certain type of patience and so on, and often it's above our, it's outside of our organization. It's at national level.
Well, does it need to be reformed then? Because at the end of the day, the three of us seem to be in agreement that it is a bottleneck. So and I know Cormac asking the question thinks so too. So is it the case, Shane, that we have patience and wait, or do we just go, listen, we need revision on this?
Probably depends what it is. I mean, I don't think we should ever be just chucking out all of the systems that we have in place, but I'm sure some of us could, I'm sure we could redesign our entire country. Yeah, I mean, we're coming up on 100 years, are we, of our kind of our nation state, and I mean, we can use it to rethink what kind of country we want to be, what kind of direction we want to head.
I like how neither of you said no comment, which is nice. Well, Jamie did. I haven't been watching Isle of Duty. Everyone seems to be talking about it, by the way, and I haven't watched it. Last question is for Shane, because it's actually something close to my heart, and I know someone had asked it, and we said, oh, listen, can you do this? But I from the homeless task force this year that has happened, one of the key things we've noticed is that there is not enough facilities in the city centre. So when it comes to and we mean facilities of dignity, like toilet facilities, shower facilities, is this something honestly and seriously that can be tested trial by beta? Because I did a walkthrough with Dublin Simon the other week, and there are still many people that are sleeping on our streets. How can we support them? Well, apart from getting them a home, how can we support them while they are there? Is there room to trial shower facilities, toilet facilities that can help?
So without doubt, there's a whole pile of assumptions in what you're assuming there is a good idea, and so there is something there that if we were doing it, it should be trialed. And in terms of being a beta project, yeah, I mean, my plate is a lot of workload on, but it's put it this way, it's something that's hugely important. It's something that we absolutely need to tackle as a city. And I've seen other cities, they also have things like homeless people can have lockers that they can leave things, that they know is going to be safe during the day. Also, they can receive posts somewhere so that they can actually get a job, because sometimes the problem is they can't actually give an address even, sometimes a lot of it's these really, really little things, but at the same time, they're small, but actually hugely complex probably. And so, yeah, I mean, they would absolutely benefit from taking a design-led approach to figure out how to solve some of these things.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a maybe, and I'm going to come to you after this. I'll wait an email. So going, hello, and from other people from this call too. I did say that was going to be last question to you, but Alan, I try my best to ask at least one question from everyone, because there's multiple questions from some people. So Alan, wants to know if DCC start using more and more external, he's gone now, external private sector IT platforms, is there a danger that procurement rules do not allow us to build long-term working relationships with good external IT provider companies?
Yeah, I mean, it's about getting the balance right between working with good providers, but then keeping an eye on innovation. So you want to kind of make sure that whoever you're working with is innovation at the same time as well, and not standing still. So yeah, I mean, procurement, that's a word I don't like, but procurement, it makes life, obviously we have to do procurement, but it's we need to really think about how we get the best outcomes from procurement, and make sure innovation is baked in into how we procure. I see a good question there from someone in terms of how we find working with people through a computer screen. I think we all have got used to that one in terms of Zoom, but maybe one comment on that one is just in terms of, it's amazing how much more interaction happens even internally within Dublin City Council now that you can just ping someone on the computer screen and not physically have to meet. I don't know, Lord Mayor, how you find it doing council meetings.
I mean, yes, they're delightful. Sorry. So, no, they actually haven't been too bad. So they haven't been. Like, I expected a lot worse, but everyone has been very collegial and respect the rules. That and the mute button is amazing, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, folks. It's coming up to the hour, and we normally stop at 1:45, but it went beyond that because this, like, folks, this is the thing. Shane and Jamie are two brilliant people in DCC that you can contact and unload your ideas. Sorry for inviting that to you guys, but unload your ideas. And just the more I've spoken to them in relation to what's been happening about the city, the more I have hope about what we will become, because I know there are lots of challenges post-COVID, but I want to say a big thank you to you both, because you've been great in terms of trying to move us forward in terms of innovation in the city. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. See you next week.